Diagnose yourself. Bright and early Monday morning, Steve headed for Kayla's cafe, determined to save his job and keep his client. If Kayla couldn't help him, maybe the caffeine would. He'd spent Sunday poring over his files, notes and proposals, looking for the flaw that had caused the client to reject the plan. In the process he realized that the only point of power he had with United Bank was task power. To restore the client's confidence he would need knowledge power, and for that he needed help. Steve entered the cafe keeping an eye out for Kayla. He made his way to the counter, and just as he was about to ask the barista if Kaylee was in, Steve heard the whistling. He turned around and sure enough, she was sitting at their regular table, as though waiting for him. Steve smiled and went over to join her. "Where did you disappear to on Saturday?" Steve asked. "I still had questions." "I thought you needed to be alone to process all you've learned at Hal's," Kayla explained. "Where is your thinking now?" "I've analysed everything to death. I just can't figure out what's wrong with the budget and strategy I've already proposed," Steve said with a sigh. "Have you ever worked with a client to develop a comprehensive ad campaign before?" Kayla asked. "No, but I've drawn up dozens of budgets over the years, and the strategy depends on the budget." Kayla pulled out 2 rubber bands and wove them together. "I'm going to use a magic trick as a metaphor for your situation. Will you play along with me?" Steve shrugged his shoulders. "Sure. Is this that cool trick you showed the kids the day we met?" Kayla nodded. "An old Indian mystic taught me the art of mind over matter," she began. Kayla the mentor transformed before Steve's eyes into Kayla the magician. As she separated the tangled bands from each other, it appeared that she was moving matter through matter. Having seen the trick before, Steve tried to detect the illusion, but Kayla's performance was flawless. He found himself as delighted as the children had been, not because it was magic, but because he appreciated her skill. "Amazing," he said. "Thank you," said Kayla. "Your goal, Steve, is to astound someone with this magic trick by this time next week." Steve laughed. He would enjoy sharing the trick with his girlfriend, Blair. He still hadn't told her what was going on at work. He knew Blair sensed something was wrong, but over the years she had learned to give him his space until he was ready to talk. It would be fun to lighten things up for her. "Okay, where do I start?" By asking yourself 2 questions about the goal of performing the magic trick. First, what is your level of competence? Second, what is your level of commitment? Let's start with the first question, your competence. "I'm definitely competent," Steve said confidently. "I watched you very carefully and saw exactly what you did, so I'm pretty sure I can do it." "Okay, let's see how competent you are." Kayla handed him the rubber bands. Steve took the 2 bands and entangled them the way he remembered Kayla doing. He flexed and stretched the bands, attempting to separate them. The bands shut off his fingers and flew across the shop. Embarrassed, he stood to fetch them, but Kayla held her arm out and stopped him. "I thought this might happen," she said, as she pulled a large bag of rubber bands out of her case. "What did I do wrong?" Steve asked. "You acted as though you had competence, when in fact you didn't," Kayla replied. "That's harsh," Steve accused. "No, it's simply the truth, and you needn't be ashamed. Competence means you have the knowledge and skill to accomplish the goal or to do the skill in question. If you've never done the trick before, then you can't possibly have the knowledge or skill. You are at the learning stage. What's wrong with that? You can't expect to be competent on a trick you've never done and have no idea how to do." "I guess you're right. Okay, show me how." Kayla took 2 rubber bands and placed them strategically on the thumb and index finger of each hand. She performed the trick slowly and deliberately. Steve shook his head in admiration. "I think I get it now. But I suppose I'll have to practice before I'm actually competent. By the way, you said I was supposed to ask myself 2 questions about the goal. The first question was about my level of competence. But I forget the second one. What was it again?" "The second question is, what is your level of commitment?" "Commitment is measured by your motivation and confidence about the goal," Kayla explained. "When we started, I was motivated and confident. Now I'm not so sure. I thought the trick would be easier than it's turning out to be." "That's exactly what happens when you move down the development continuum," Kayla said enthusiastically. "The what? Are you taking me into a magical space-time continuum thing?" Steve joked. "The development continuum is simply a model of 4 stages people usually experience when they're learning to master something." Kayla reached into a magic case and pulled out a glossy card, which she handed to Steve. D1. Low competence, high commitment. D2. Low to some competence, low commitment. D3. Moderate to high competence, variable commitment. D4. High competence, high commitment. In terms of the rubber band trick, look at these 4 stages and tell me which one you think you started in and where you are now. Kayla's eyes were bright as though she were about to reveal a great secret. Steve studied the graphic. I guess I started here at D1, with low competence, but high commitment. Now I feel like I'm at D2, low competence with low commitment. That's normal, she said. When you first begin to learn something, or take on a goal, you have this naive enthusiasm that overshadows your lack of competence. Once you get into the goal, you realize you don't have the competence, and your expectations are shattered. Reality shock, Steve said, nodding his head knowingly. Exactly. Kayla seemed pleased with Steve's understanding. D2, which is short for Development Level 2, is a natural stage of learning. It's where you realize there is a discrepancy between the expectations you had in the beginning, Developmental Level 1 or D1, and the reality of the current situation. So, everyone goes through this reality shock every time they are learning to do something? Steve asked. The development continuum captures what people typically experience, so you can be better prepared to handle what will probably happen. It helps to recognize how your competence and commitment change as you learn something new or pursue a goal. Significant research validates these stages of development, but if you simply think about the goals you've accomplished, and the ones you haven't, you'll realize your own experience is proof enough, Kayla said. Steve picked up 2 more rubber bands as he reflected on Kayla's words. He entwined the bands, making sure they were placed on his fingers and thumbs the way he'd seen Kayla do it. He stretched and twisted them for show, then attempted to do the sleight of hand that would separate them as if by magic. Again, one of the bands went flying, almost hitting Kayla in the forehead. Steve would have laughed if he hadn't been so mortified that he nearly poked out Kayla's eye. Okay, stop right there, Kayla held up both hands. How do you feel about the trick now? Frustrated, discouraged, disappointed? Steve said. That's why the second development level 2 is called the disillusioned learner stage. What are the other stages called? Steve asked. The first development level, D1, is called the enthusiastic beginner stage. That's where you began. If you make it through the second level, the D2 or disillusioned learner stage, where you are now, then you reach D3, which is known as the capable but cautious performer stage. Finally, when you have mastered the skill, you reach D4, or the self-reliant achiever stage. Excuse me, Kayla, but you said if I make it through the second disillusioned learner, then I go to the third stage of capable but cautious performer. But what happens if I don't make it? You tell me, Kayla said. Steve reflected a moment. That's where I give up and quit, right? Right, Kayla confirmed. So that's your dilemma on the magic trick right now, is it not? You realize it is going to take practice to master it, and you're not sure it's worth it, am I right? As usual. So quit. I just might. Steve sounded like a little boy defying his mother. It's always your choice to quit or keep going, Kayla reminded him. But sometimes you give up without conscious choice, so it feels like failure. Are you suggesting that if I choose to quit, then it's not failure? When you're at the disillusioned learner stage of your goal, and you lack competence and commitment, you are not a failure if you thoughtfully decide it is not worth the time and effort to proceed, she said. You are a self-leader proactively accepting responsibility. What if I don't want to quit? Steve asked. I'll answer that question next time. That's the end of your lesson for today, she said with finality. Steve couldn't hide his disappointment. My lesson? What is my lesson? I've learned that I'm at the second stage of disillusioned learner on the magic trick, and I'm about ready to quit my job. And that's my lesson? Your lesson is to think about what it will take for you to get to your next level of development, Kayla announced as she headed toward her office. Steve followed, feeling a sense of déjà vu at the now familiar scene of Kayla rifling through files and drawers to find what she wanted. Here it is. She handed Steve a crumpled sheet. When I am at D1, the enthusiastic beginner level of development, with low competence and high commitment, I need blank. When I am at D2, the disillusioned learner level of development, with low to some competence and low commitment, I need blank. When I am at D3, the capable but cautious level of development, with moderate to high competence and variable commitment, I need blank. When I am at D4, the self-reliant achiever level of development, with high competence and high commitment, I need blank. Your homework assignment is to write down what you would need to help you progress from enthusiastic beginner to self-reliant achiever on this rubber band trick. Kayla said, "Remember, I want you to amaze your family and friends with it by this time next week." "What do you mean? What would I need?" Kayla stopped dead in her tracks. "Excellent question." She slapped her open hand to her forehead. "I can't believe I forgot." She took the sheet from his hand and turned it over to reveal 2 columns on the back. Steve was puzzled. He could have sworn the back of the sheet was blank when she first handed it to him. Pointing to the 2 columns, she said, "These are examples of what you need to increase your competence and build commitment if you're going to progress from enthusiastic beginner to self-reliant achiever on a goal." Steve turned the sheet over before focusing on the back side, still wondering how he could have missed noticing the 2 columns. Competence. To increase your competence to achieve a goal, you need direction from someone who will 1. Set a clear goal, 2. Generate an action plan, 3. Show you how to do the goal or skill, 4. Clarify roles, 5. Provide timelines, 6. Establish priorities, 7. Monitor and evaluate your work and give feedback. Commitment. To build your commitment to achieve a goal, you need support from someone who will 1. Listen to you, 2. Recognize and appreciate your efforts, 3. Facilitate your problem solving, 4. Ask you for input, 5. Provide rationale, remind you why you are doing it, 6. Share information about their experiences relevant to the goal, 7. Share information about the organization relevant to the goal. "I hope this helps clarify what I meant," Kayla said. "When your competence is low, you need direction. When your commitment is low, you need support. What's the difference between direction and support?" "Good question," said Kayla. Directive behavior is hands-on. It involves deciding, teaching, observing, and providing frequent feedback. Supportive behavior is more about listening, involving, facilitating, and encouraging. If you can learn to diagnose your own development level on any given task, you'll know what you need to ask for to succeed. "Fine, but once I know what to ask for, who do I ask?" "That depends," Kayla said. "If it's about the magic trick, you can obviously ask me, other magicians, or even research online. What if it's about your United Bank ad campaign? Who do you ask for help on that?" "Excellent question," Steve said. He felt as though he'd been jolted back into reality. He'd been so wrapped up in the magic trick and learning about the development continuum, he'd forgotten that the real point of it all was to save his job. "Think of your goal for the United Bank account," Kayla said. "Think about the skills required to be an account executive and orchestrate their ad campaign. Then diagnose your development level on each skill. Remember, when your competence is low, you need direction. When your commitment is low, you need support." "I think I've got it." Steve gave Kayla a high five and gathered his papers. He was eager to complete his homework and see how his new knowledge applied to his job.